Welcome back, everyone. Next, we have Glucotrack Inc. It trades on the NASDAQ under the symbol GCTK and is focused on the design, development, and commercialization of novel technologies for people with diabetes and pre-diabetes. Please welcome its CEO, Paul Goode. Nice to see you, Paul.
Thank you, Anna. I appreciate that.
All right, the floor is yours. Call me back when you're ready for questions. Yes,
ma'am. Well, hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to meet you. Excited to be here and share with you about Glucotrack. Again, as Anna mentioned, we're a NASDAQ company, so I'll throw out all the typical disclaimers in advance, and then we'll move right on into our agenda. I'll give you a little bit of background on us. As Anna said, we're doing products for diabetes patients. In particular, we're working on an implantable continuous glucose sensor. I'd like to go over a little bit the state of diabetes, that diabetes market, and then migrate, a little more narrow into the CGM market in general, and then where our technology is differentiated. And so what's important about our technology, why we think we have something very meaningful for the market, and then, of course, some development milestones, and then happy to take some questions. So as Anna mentioned, we're NASDAQ listed, helping people manage their diabetes. And just for your general knowledge, diabetes, broad population, there's type 1, there's type 2. Type 1 is an immunological disorder. It's about 5 to 10% of the patients, and it's where the patients can't produce their own insulin, and they are insulin dependent. Type 2 is typically, not always, but mostly caused by diet and lifestyle. So in our Western lifestyle, without exercise and without, watching weight too well, you can easily get into prediabetes and then, of course, into type 2 diabetes. That's about 90 to 95% of the entire population. And because it's diet and lifestyle, it is truly a growing market, a patient population, unfortunately. What's important for us, what we'd like to get across to you is that, this market is rather large. I'll go into a little more details on that. It's large and it's continuously growing. In our particular sector, which is, continuous glucose monitoring, there's some very good tailwinds there. There's so much clinical evidence coming out, over the last several years, 5 to 10, that shows that this really benefits patients, not just, those who are insulin dependent, but even those who are not in the type 2 space, for example. It benefits them so much in helping them manage their disease state. And managing their disease state prevents a host of other complications, which I'll get to in a moment. So there's growth in that. There's a coverage being, CMS, which is, insurance coverage for Medicare and Medicaid from the U.S. government, is expanding coverage for those types of patients, as well as a lot of private payers. So that's promoting a lot of growth in the market. What we have is a differentiated technology from what is on the market, which really addresses unmet user needs, which is primarily those devices, or things you wear in your body. And so we're going the implantable route, and there's no need to wear something. And have all the hassle factors of, the frequent replacements and all the side effects of a wearable device. We also have more accurate, because we're measuring blood. We're measuring blood continuously. So we will be having the gold standard, which is blood and measurement, very accurate, very fast, and doing that continuously. And of course, we have some good feasibility data and preclinical data and very good early accuracy results that we just put out in a press release earlier this month. In diabetes, again, talking about the disease, global disease, I think everybody's aware pretty much of how big it is. The numbers are astonishing, and the growth rates are astonishing despite the best efforts. And a lot of it is, as I mentioned, due to lifestyle. And as our lifestyle migrates across the globe, so does the growth of type 2 diabetes. As you can see from some of these statistics, every 5 seconds, somebody in the world dies from diabetes. Almost 9 out of 10 people are undiagnosed. Of the undiagnosed cases are in low and middle income countries, and close to half of the patients, globally are undiagnosed. And then, of course, about 10% are on the cusp of having diabetes. So it is a large market. In the U.S. in particular, there's 38 million patients with diabetes. Again, this is type 1, which is about, 5, 7, 8% or so, and then type 2, which is the rest. And then, of course, there's, about 1 out of 3 citizens or residents in the country are on the cusp of having diabetes, again, due to our lifestyle here in the U.S. You can see on the right there of the slide is that, diabetes, even in the U.S., is one of the top 10 leading causes of death. And then, it's not just a blood sugar issue. It's not just, oh, my sugars are too low, I'm going to pass out and maybe not recover. It is also the complications, because diabetes affects so many other organs and organ systems. As you can see, it's the leading cause of blindness through retinopathy that is caused by diabetes, or that's one of the primary causes, retinopathy. Kidney failure, again, about 40% of patients wind up with some sort of chronic kidney disease, which leads to, dialysis and other types of treatments that are necessary. And the heart disease, stroke and risk for heart attack is, a twofold increase. So it's really a systemic problem, within healthcare, the amount of money spent in healthcare on diabetes, which is why more and more providers are reimbursing diagnostics such as CGM that help patients better manage their disease. Speaking of the CGM market in particular, it's a pretty mature market. The first device launched in the late 90s. That company was acquired a few years later by Medtronic. Now there's 4 players. I get into that a little bit. But CGM is continuous glucose monitoring. These are devices that go under the skin. Some of them, three of the main players have a device that goes through the skin. It's connected to electronics that you wear on the skin and transmits the data to your cell phone. And one has a device that goes under the skin. But we'll get that in a second. It's a great product, works very well. It's not without challenges, but it's helped patients manage their disease. And you can see here the growth rate is astronomical. I mean, the CGM market finished 2022 with an $8.1 billion in combined revenue from the 4 major players. 2023 numbers are not quite out yet, but they're expected to be, $9 billion plus minus, and their growth continues. And you can see here, just the user base is growing dramatically, but even still, this is 7.5 million, user base globally. And, we've got 38 million in the US alone. So there's a lot of room for growth. And so why isn't every patient with diabetes not using the technology? Well, part of it has been simply because getting the clinical evidence to show that it works in type 2 patients and so forth, and in all segments of type 2. And then getting the healthcare reimbursement agencies to provide that. And that's growing and that's happening. But also, even in the type 1 market, which has been reimbursed for quite some time, even according to the market leader's own data, they're only about 55% penetrated into that market. And why is that? Well, you can see here, these are the 4 players. The Abbott, Dexcom, and Medtronic are those that, go through the skin and sense under the skin. And at the bottom is Senseonics, which has a device that goes under the skin for 6 months and needs to be replaced. And has a little pod that goes over it that powers the device wirelessly and transmits the data. So you have this wearable aspect for all these. And there's, the problems with wearability is not the same for everybody, but as a collection, it's a massive set of problems. People don't want to be seen with the device, or it's uncomfortable, or the adhesive itches on the skin, or it hurts going in, or it hurts while it's in, or it's just a hassle to constantly manage this. So there's a lot of those issues, and that's one of the major challenges with this technology, as good as it is. And the other one is a lot of patients have the perception that it's not very accurate, because diabetes patients, type 1 patients in particular, can sense a lot of their own conditions, whether their sugar is high or low, and they'll look at their sensor and it may not give the reading that they expect to see. And then so they will take a finger stick that you're probably used to seeing many diabetes patients doing, the older technology, the BGM, where they would take a finger stick, put a drop of blood on a strip, and get a reading. And so they say, well, gosh, that these readings are not aligned. Well, that's because that's blood, and these sensors are measuring in the subcutaneous tissue, and there's a time lag there. Some patients understand that, many do not, and so that's a challenge, and they see a perception of inaccuracy. But this data is, these things are published. I cited here some data in the fine print, but these are studies from 2017, 2018. And back then, this technology was, the FDA still required the technology to be validated, or like before a patient makes a clinical decision to dose insulin, for example, they would have to check their blood glucose with that finger stick technology. They would also have to feed on a regular basis, every so often, a finger stick value to keep the device in calibration. And around 2017-ish, that time frame, these one by one, these companies, got clearance from the FDA to not be restrained that way anymore. And that was great. And so we thought, well, maybe a lot of these concerns that these patients have, especially on the accuracy side, maybe those have gone away over time, since they don't need to stick their fingers as much anymore. As it turns out, we conducted that's not the case, because we conducted a market research study last year, in 2023, and found that in surveying over 750 patients, the problems still persist, and you can see on the chart here. Obviously, the largest problem across the board is Bluetooth connection issues, primarily signal loss, and that's typical for most wireless devices, and nothing unique in the CGM world in that regard. But you look below that, you see that they feel that the device is inaccurate, that it doesn't last the full time that it's supposed to be on the body, that the sensor falls off, there's rash or skin irritation, there's discomfort. So all of these challenges are still there. In fact, if you look at the very bottom line, only 1 out of 7 patients polled said, yeah, I don't really have a problem with it, which means 6 out of 7, have one of these issues, or one or more of these issues above. So there's still some big challenges with this technology. And that's where we come in. We want to address those major challenges, the wearability and the accuracy. So we're developing an implantable device that's merging the best of both worlds. It's merging the finger stick measurement that is typically done as the gold standard, but it's a static measurement in time. It's not continuous. It's just at that moment that the measurement's taken. And the continuous measurement from under the skin, but the fact that it's continuous, we're merging both of those together, and we're doing continuous measurement in the blood. So we're having an implantable device. As you can see in the picture on the left, you see it's pretty small, stacked up against a few quarters. And on the right, you see the catheter that's connected to it that goes into a blood vessel, where the measurement is actually being performed. There's no wearable device. The device, this everything here goes under the skin in a very simple 20-minute type of a procedure, and very uncomplicated, and then transmits the data straight to the cell phone of the patient. The device lasts 2 years, as opposed to what's on the market today, which is anywhere from, the 3 companies that have the one that goes through the skin is anywhere from 7 to 15 days, and there's this repeated, changing them every 7 to 15 days. And then there's the one that's an implant, which is 6 months, and it needs to be repeated. So we're offering, 4x the longevity that's out there. What we're also doing, obviously, is we're going to have to go through clinical trials and get FDA clearance to sell the product naturally. And one of the ways we are de-risking that is on the product design itself. We're leveraging very established implantable device manufacturing and techniques and materials and processes, and also on the sensing or the chemistry side. We're using the same type of enzyme-based sensing techniques that are used by, some of those 4 players that I mentioned earlier. So it's very de-risked on a technology side for the regulatory agencies, even for the clinical community to know, okay, this is just another form of that. So we're not having to re-educate. And on the implant side, yes, we have to implant the device. And we're also leveraging very common implant techniques, both for that device that you see in the picture on the left and the catheter that you see in the picture on the right. Very standard techniques. The device is very similar to an insertable cardiac monitor. which, is done over 100,000 a year in the US. And then same for, the catheter. That's very much like a central line implant, central venous catheter, done millions of times a year. A very established procedure, and we're leveraging that, and our timelines and tools are just like that. So it's a low risk in those regards, but it is still implantable. And our concern was, who's going to do this? It is implantable. Does the market, do the patients want an implantable device? So we decided to conduct a survey on this concept and do concept market research. And we partnered with the leading diabetes market research company, we feel in the world. They've been doing this for 15 years, exclusive diabetes market research. They have a patient database of thousands of patients, type 1, type 2, CGM users, non-users, and so forth, and many different categories. And we partnered with them for a survey, and we wanted to do, a few hundred patients. The survey filled up so fast that we wound up getting over 750 before we were actually able to turn it off. So there was a great demand in people interested in just doing the survey on an implantable device, and that was positive. And the results were also quite positive. Out of the 750 plus that were surveyed, over half the respondents said, yeah, this is something that I would be interested in. Does that mean that they would implant it? That obviously that requires, sure, further thought naturally. But we also asked them, what do you find as the most appealing aspects for this concept? And sure enough, it exactly was what we expected. One is it's a very long sensor life. So, they don't have to go through the hassle of replacing sensors all the time. And even, and I know this personally, I have a grandson who's got type 1 diabetes. And, my daughter, her husband are always having to manage the devices and shipping and replacing. And it really is, it's a logistical hassle. And so to have a set it and forget it is incredible, and not have to worry about something that's on your body. Secondly, they got the fact that it's measuring blood glucose, which is the gold standard. It is the most accurate and the most fast. There's no time delay with the measurement, and it is the most accurate representation of their sugar levels. Thirdly, of course, is that there's no wearable component. The rest of the features that we were offering were not as important to them. They were good features, and yes, but the top three, as you can see, were really what we identified going into this as challenges. And you can see some of the patient statements that are on the right there as to what they felt about this when they were given, an opportunity to write open-ended what they thought about the concept. So taking this and looking at what our market opportunity we think might be. Now, traditionally, implantable continuous glucose monitoring or CGM technology. Typically, as I mentioned earlier, it's been type 1 and type 2 insulin dependent, but more recently, payer coverage has expanded to have type 2 that are once a day insulin or type 2 that are maybe not insulin dependent, but they're at risk for going to low blood sugars, which can happen with some medications. And so the insured market has dramatically expanded very recently, and so the overall, market, as you can see here, is in the 10 million range of patients that would be covered by insurance, and that would need this technology. And there's clinical evidence that shows that CGM in these cohorts helps a lot. If we're conservative and say we're not going to get more than 50%, like the previous slide said, and if we're just conservative, say, look, we're just going to get 1 out of 10 patients. Say we have a 10% adoption rate, and that's an estimate naturally. And if we even just got the reimbursement rates that the existing CGM players are getting, you're looking at, an annual market opportunity of, more than $2 billion. So that's quite large. We do expect to get a larger reimbursement because these are reimbursed as durable medical equipment that is, disposable. We would be in a different category of reimbursement, and therefore, and there's a procedure involved. So we do expect a higher reimbursement, but we are still evaluating that with experts in reimbursement and who know the field. So in the end, summary, we feel, our intravascular implantable continuous blood glucose monitoring is creating a new class of glucose sensors. It's not BGM, which is the single point in time finger stick blood glucose monitoring. It's not CGM, which is continuous but delayed because it's measuring under the skin and you have to wear something on the body. It is an implantable continuous blood glucose monitoring system. And it has, it's designed to have the longest implant life by far. And we think that it's going to increase, patients will be excited to use this. It will increase compliance. And by increasing compliance, you'll have better patient outcomes and decreased payer costs. Our development milestones is, just as a last slide, in last summer, we completed a feasibility study that demonstrated that yes, 2-year implant life is possible with this device, with this chemistry. And so that was completed in December. In October, we did a preclinical study to look at the surgical techniques to deliver the device. Was it as simple as it was designed to be? And the data suggests that yes, indeed. And, of course, these were in animals, not in humans, but that it was, very straightforward and simple to do the procedure. And then we had in January earlier this year, we published results of a long-term animal study where we monitored the safety of the animals as well as, the outcomes of the procedure as well. And the long-term safety of the animals, as well as the accuracy, and very compelling data. And so moving forward this year, our goal is to, of course, continue with more, even longer-term animal studies, and then work with the FDA to get a first-in-human study with our commercial version of the device that is presently in development. So thank you for listening. I hope it was interesting, and I'm very happy to to field any questions that you may have. And I think Anna would be the moderator here.
Yes, thank you so much, Paul. Okay, we have a question from Anthony Fitzgerald. He asks, do you have any bloodstream infection data on the catheter use?
We have no bloodstream infection data because we've had no bloodstream infections. And of course, this is in preclinical, animal studies. But the other thing is, again, as I mentioned, we designed the device and the procedure to be very similar to devices and procedures currently, like a central venous catheter. The materials and the biocompatibility of all that and the way it's put in is just like those. So complication rates, such as bloodstream infections, we expect to be, very similar to those, which, are low.
And Ian Flores asks, does accuracy vary between different CGM devices and with different levels of diabetes, type 1 or type 2?
Good question. Accuracy, accuracy in the CGM industry, accuracy is a bit of, so the short answer is yes, it does vary between devices, but not between patients, type 1 or type 2. Well, not necessarily. Type 1 patients can go from high to low and low to high much faster than type 2 patients. This I'm speaking in general, of course, there's always exceptions. And because there's a time delay, and some sensors may have a longer time delay than others, so you might see a little bit of accuracy challenge when the blood sugars are changing rapidly, and particularly in type 1 patients. But how these CGM companies, define their performance, there's, it's evolved over the years, and there are various metrics. And so at this point, I would say that all of them are, by those metrics, all of them are relatively the same. They have their different arguments, but they're all relatively the same, but they're all interstitial. And so we're targeting to be, a bit more accurate is our goal and our target, because we're in the blood. So we do not have the time delay to account for, and that should improve accuracy readings.
And Rod Hollander says, when you say you're de-risking the regulatory approvals, is that because the size, shape, weight is similar to what has been approved previously? If you can explain that in more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. These are great questions. All three so far. So the implant device is, the form factor, the materials, the manufacturing techniques, all the things that the FDA looks at. Well, they look at a lot of stuff. They look at all that, of course. They look at the human factors around it. And then, of course, they look at, obviously, safety and performance. But in addition to safety and performance, there's a whole bunch of engineering and manufacturing and human factors, things that they take into consideration. So on the implant, on the electronic side of it, it's just like an insertable cardiac monitor, which the FDA is very familiar with. There's 4 major players out there selling these. And so that is, the FDA should be comfortable with all of those features, with respect to the insertable cardiac, or with the respect to the electronics, because they're like an insertable cardiac monitor. On the catheter side, again, it's like in placing a central venous catheter or central line procedure and using the same tools, same types of materials. So we're saying, look, we're doing this. And also, cardiac pacemaker leads, go in and stay inside, a lot longer distances and all the way down into the heart. We're not doing anything like that, of course. We're just in for a few centimeters. But, so there's so much data out there that de-risks all that we're leveraging. So really, we don't have to, obviously we have to check the boxes with them, but there's no new risks in those categories. So our focus is going to be primarily is, does the sensor work as accurately as we expect it to be, and that there's no safety complications, which we don't expect, again, because we're leveraging.
Damian Shaw asks if you have patents on the design and process, and have you checked all of the patents of the competition?
Yes, so we do have patents in process. We have a lot of work going. We have looked at the competition. The good news is that, for implantable continuous glucose sensing, there isn't much competition. In the early days of continuous glucose monitoring, there was groups that were doing implantable glucose sensing, and there was only one doing the wearable. And they bifurcated. Of course, the wearables went out for various reasons. So a lot of the implantable patents out there are expired. Nobody in this, that we're aware of, and that our searches we've done have been looking in this particular space that we have. And as far as we're aware, there's only one implantable company that is still working in this space, but they are using a completely different sensing technology, and they're doing it in the subcutaneous tissue space. So there is, we feel like we have a very nice roadmap to be protected.
And Pete Gonzalez asks if you have the bandwidth to bring it to the market when the time comes, or will you be looking for a partner or buyout?
Good question. That question is obviously, we're looking, so obviously at present, do we have the bandwidth at present? No. Right now we're more development stage and we're not commercial stage. And we're not going to put the cart before the horse and build out a commercial operation yet, until we're ready, until we know that we're close to a commercial approval. So the short answer to that is we don't have that bandwidth yet by design. Would we look for a buyout or a partner? At this point, we think we have a good product, and we are building this company to stand on its own 2 feet. That being said, obviously, there's always consideration when someone knocks on the door, and so we would not walk away from any considerations in that regard.
And we have a question from Ken. You mentioned it, but he wants you to explain one more time where the device is implanted and what are the dimensions.
Good question. The dimensions, I should know off the top of my head, and I have it in millimeters, but we're probably more inches here. And I don't have the inches off the top of my head, but basically it's about, so the device is about 2 inches long. It's about, if you took 3/4 and stacked them, it's about as thick as 3/4. And the width is just a little bit wider than that. So that'll give you a feel for the device dimensions. The catheter that goes into the vessel is just a little over 1 millimeter, 1.3 millimeters, which in inches is, point something something, very, very tiny. So very, very tiny catheter. The, smaller than a pacemaker lead, for example, which stays in forever. And the device goes in, up here on the chest, and it goes into a vein in that area. It's not an artery, but a vein.
All right. Well, Paul, do you have any closing remarks for our viewers today? We are finished with the questions.
No, if you have any further follow-up, feel free to reach out at investors@glucotrack.com, and we will be monitoring that and be happy to get back to you. And thank you for your time.
Wonderful. Yes, just Paul said, investors at Glucotrack. It's on the screen. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to following along your journey with some future updates, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Okay, everyone, stay with us. We'll be right back with our next presenter.